Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 111 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and over 300 partnering organizations from all over the world that have come together in the midst of this extraordinary pandemic to provide a global commons for people on a daily basis to come together to share their experiences, to share solutions, to confer as to how we can increase our strategic effectiveness to make a difference in a world that seems to be spinning day by day out of control. And we are deeply honored with our partners. We're live streaming over 40 channels each day to 15 to 20,000 people. We're building local chapters. We've just launched a local chapter in the Netherlands and more are on the way. So we believe that we're providing a service to people of goodwill around the world who want to form community and hold hands as we go through this extraordinary human experience. Today, I just want to note the news that perhaps some of you have already caught, and that is about the imminent passing of Thich Nhat Hanh. Many of us received communication over the last 24 hours that this great Buddhist monk, now 94 years old, has come to the point where it is time to move to the other side. I remember Thich Nhat Hanh very clearly. I came of age during the Vietnam War. Those of you who went through it or remember your history know that at a certain point, Vietnamese monks were setting themselves on fire in the middle of the streets in protest and self-immolating to call attention to the travesties of justice and humanity being exacted by the United States and the South Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese. It was just a protest against war. And one of those monks was Thich Nhat Hanh. He had a small monastery and he rose to fame with a book called Vietnam, Lotus in the Fire. He then immigrated to the West and set up a retreat center in Plum Village in France. And over the last 60 years, Thich Nhat Hanh has been a beacon of light to the world. He coined the term engaged Buddhism. He coined the term inner being. He's written over 100 books. He's traveled all over the world. He has been one of the great lights in the spiritual domain of human civilization during our lifetime. And now it has come to that time when one of our great avatars is passing. Apparently he's been intentional about this from what I understand. But I think it's good to note in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of all the craziness and the negative news, that light endures, love burns brightly. And one of the great souls of our time is about to continue his journey to the other side. Now I'd like to turn it over to my friend and co-moderator, Sabine van Gafka, who will commence our program. Sabine, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim, and also in the spirit of Thich Nhat Hanh, as you also mentioned, that love and light endures, and that is truly a consensus that resonates, I believe, at least with all of us within the Humanity Rising sphere and beyond. And many of us and many of the Humanity Rising conversations have been elaborating around life and the tools, the resources, the knowledge that is necessary for us to not only live on this planet, but to also thrive on this planet in unity with both ourselves as a species, but also with our Mother Earth, our planet, and all of our resources. And a lot of the time, this can also raise up a question of, what does this really mean? All of these tools and insights that we might have at hand, what does it mean on a personal and interpersonal level? And how do we integrate this into our daily life, our daily practice, into our ethics, morals, and values? And what are these processes of the inner work that is much, much more coming to the surface now on a larger scale, very much ignited by the pandemic, by COVID, which has made us realize that we're all interconnected in one way, or most of us at least realize that by now, all interconnected one way or the other, and that we're now really gathering around a common pandemic and a common new way of life, a new norm. And that introspection and looking into ourselves and the inner work is even more and more important today, to really start to align ourselves with ourselves, to understand what is important and what are our ethics and values above all. And some of us, or many of us, or a few of us are having own experiences. I had mine that was ignited last year with a spiritual journey, or the dark night of the soul, or the spiritual awakening, where we look into ourselves and our patterns and our shadows and our archetypes and all of that inner work that is both painful, transformational, but rewarding and essential if we really are going to step up to become the heroes and the humanity that our planet and our species really need. And spiritually, the soul, as we often refer to, is a term that is referred to as source of life. And it is said that the soul has its journey on this journey, and that it's about learning and growing. And hopefully Humanity Rising is a platform for that, where all of our amazing wisdom-filled speakers and contributors also allow us to be facilitated on this path of really learning and growing and understanding together. And this brings me also to today's session, where our wisdom-filled panel of panelists will be discussing the importance of really seeing the shadow of our extractive system for the way we live and the way we're interacting on this earth, and how we also are part of this, and the invitation that lies within our own hearts to start to look and maybe invest in another way of living and also being. And this journey is both, of course, personal, but it is also collective. And I think that's yet another transparency that we're seeing with COVID, this interconnectedness that also makes this journey not only on an individual basis, but on a collective basis. We all have to shift and make changes. And whatever it requires, the dark night of the soul, going through our traumas, or whatever that might entail, but that we in unity can see more clarity around it. And I think what's also been mentioned so many times in Humanity Rising, it can never be mentioned enough, and also bearing in mind the introduction that Jim also did, that this is all about a journey of love and healing, both on an individual level and collectively, and really understanding the vibration and energy of love and healing, and what ways can we support each other and ourselves in this journey. So I thought we would have 1 minute of heart coherence to really align with that thought, align with the thought of, what does love and healing really feel like in our bodies? Because when we start to feel, we can actually start to be and act upon it. So with some soothing music in the background, I invite us all to 1 minute heart coherence with a simple inhale and exhale for 1 minute. So Richard, if we can have the music, and if there's no music, put your hand on your heart. Allow yourself to be here and now, inhaling. It's amazing to know that our heart possesses a network of 40,000 neurons, which provide a direct line of communication to the brain. And this is also the reason why our heart has the ability to function in an interdependent way. It can sense, it can process information, make decisions, and even demonstrate a type of learning and memory. And also remembering that beautiful saying that we've had a few times in Humanity Rising, that the longest journey we can take is that from the head to the heart. And with that, I want to hand over to today's convener, Jules Bistrova, who is the founder of Inner Resilience Network and also director of the Era of Care project. She has 25-year history of community organizing and a thriving private practice in trauma-informed mind-body healing work. And she served as an interfaith minister, a philosopher, poet, an academic, an interdisciplinary researcher, and a culture changer who is on the boots on the ground activist. And she's here today with her panelists to share their wisdom on the theme, Through Our Dark Night to a New Day. Jules, I hand over the word to you.
Good morning, everybody. At least it's morning for me. Maybe. So good to be here. Thank you so much for that heart coherence meditation. What a wonderful way to start these off. And in honor of Thich Nhat Hanh, I thought I would also start off our session by sharing his very well-known famous poem, Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving, to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding herself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl refugee on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am also the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain, it's like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. What a perfect poem for this topic that we're sharing with you today. And before I give you kind of the why and the overview of why this topic, I just want to say hello to all of you out there. You know, we're doing all these things online and on Zoom, and it sometimes feels disconnected, even though we're very connected. And I just want to give a real recognition of the connection with all of you out there listening right now, that I feel you. And I love the saying, I am another you. I am you in this great field, this non-local field of inner being that we're sharing. And this topic is something that many people is very alive for many people. I've been part of a lot of conversations. We hold different dialogues and groups in the Inner Resilience Network, and so many people are talking about, you know, this time that we're in, and how it's so challenging. I live in Northern California, where I right in the center of fire after fire after fire, and it's been very, very, very challenging for my community. Most people are exhausted, and they have the, you know, PTSD, and I've listened to my friends on the East Coast with the hurricanes, and of course we've got things all over the world that are challenging people greatly right now, and not to mention the COVID, which is going on still. And we're going into this time of the year that is traditionally understood as the thinning of the veils, the darkening time. We go into the time when we meet, when we spend time to honor our ancestors, to really honor the dark time, the season. But it feels like that on a collective level. It feels like this time of the season is amplified right now by the time of the season of humanity in history, because we are we're going through this time together of kind of like a reckoning, an awakening for sure, but it's also a reckoning. And so many conversations I've been part of is people like are feeling that personal challenge. They're feeling that their own dark night, in whatever form that's in. And yet it's I think it's brings solace to know that we're not alone, that many of us are in this and we're feeling this together. So the more I think we can make that connection and realize that we're in this together, well, I think that lightens the load. But it is a very personal experience to go through, you know, a dark night experience. And right now we're in a collective. So we're going to be talking about that today. And part of the reckoning, I want to really just say off the bat here that is really important. The systems that we have built many of our societies upon, and here especially in the United States, are built on very dark things, very dark activities. We have been, a lot of our enterprises are profit from the suffering of others. They, those that are profiting, you know, the 1%, and all those that just look towards money as being the thing to chase in life, are often profiting off of the oppression and the suffering of others. And our country started profiting off of the slavery of our Black brothers and sisters. And it also profited off of the oppression and theft of the Native people in this country. So we built a country on some dark stuff. And there's a lot of good things about the country too. I'm not saying it's all dark, and I'm not saying that we don't have a lot of good things, because we do. But what I want to speak to here is that we have some reckoning to do. And as we move into another way of being, we first need to name and really see what has been happening. It's important to understand our history, and it's important to understand the things that we've taken for granted, that we've assumed, that we've not really thought about, that item that you bought in the store from Walmart, that a child, you know, labor may have made it. So that's the kind of thing that our system has been built on. And so moving to a regenerative system, we first must see the system that we're in. And then I believe that COVID, many people are saying COVID has been as hard and as challenging as it's also been extremely an amazing gift, because we've stopped and we've had to look at things, and we've had to look at ourselves. So maybe that's what it needed to take for us to do this. So I'm grateful for that. I'm not grateful for the suffering, and I don't want people to die from it, but I think that this is an amazing opportunity we're in, and we're in a rite of passage as a species. So that means embracing this dark time, and knowing that there is the only way we can get through to a new way is to go through, is to lean in. There isn't any way around it. There isn't any way to avoid it anymore, unless you want to stay in the dying system. So it's not as bad as it feels and looks from the outside, looking into the dark night and the passage that we're in. When we go in together and when we lean in together, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of amazing healing that is available to us now, and that we want to just share with you today, and really bring you in. I just want to like just bring all of you in to my heart right now, and just say, I really love you. I feel you out there, and I'm just really grateful that we can have this time together to talk about this. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my colleague, Richard. I'm going to introduce, maybe I'll go ahead and introduce both of them. Richard is going to speak next about his take. And I just want to share that all of this is our perspective, and you may have other opinions and differ in how you see this subject matter, and I welcome that. Feel free to share in the chat. So Richard is a colleague at the Inner Resilience Network, and been really enjoying connecting with him. He's a weaver of transformative arts and a multidisciplinary synthesizer, a scholar of psychotherapy and spiritual consciousness, husband, father, grandfather, scholar, social activist, meditation teacher, guide, and visionary. He works with culture creators and creative artists and entrepreneurs. And he works on liberating and healing people that are in communities that are in spiritual trauma. And maybe he'll say a little bit about that. He's also a climate activist, and he works towards low-cost community-based climate trauma and resilient services with a mutual aid focus and informed by evolutionary consciousness. And he's writing a book called on the concept of toxic enculturation. Very interesting. So Richard, I'm really happy that you're here. If you want to bring up your video, and I'll hand it over to you and take it away.
Thanks, Jewel. Hi, everybody. I would like to begin by conjuring the voice of the great visionary cosmic Irish bard, James Joyce, who said, "History is a nightmare from which I'm trying to awaken." And connect that with the great developments and gifts of our understanding of human trauma that we've been blessed by over the past 30 years. Except for some indigenous peoples who have understood it and applied it to their lives in their own ways, we really as a species have not benefited or even possessed a working knowledge of trauma that we could use to heal and to flourish as a species. And this has occurred to us only over the last 30 years. So all of our rules of law, all of our religions and systems of living, none of them have really been informed by a deep understanding of trauma. And as a result, we have mistreated each other throughout history. And we now understand that we are experiencing cascading waves of the multi-generational transmission of trauma out of the past. This is directly connected to and lives within the human shadow. Even Jung, who introduced us as a culture to the idea of the shadow, was not really trauma informed. And even John of the Cross, who described hundreds of years ago the dark night of the soul, was not trauma informed. But we now have this knowledge, and it has a direct relevance to our own consciousness expansion, to the big question that we face: what kind of a species do we want to be? And this opens up the door to all kinds of possibilities for contending with these cascading waves of multi-generational historic trauma that roll across our entire globe and contribute to biospheric collapse, which is the second wave looming from the future, is enormous suffering, waves of suffering looming from the future that have to do with the collapse of the biosphere. And these two forces, one from the past and one from the future, we find ourselves caught between in an evolutionary threshold of consciousness. And through applying the knowledge that we now have and integrating it into all of our spiritual paths, all of our consciousness paths, we can make an enormous difference in how we meet the challenge of biospheric collapse and engage perhaps even in an ancestral healing of all of the harms that have been done in the past. And this lives in our bodies, this lives in our hearts, in our guts, in our nervous systems. And this is a profound gift to have just over the last 30 years or so in a real sense, through the contribution of a number of different people, that this can be synthesized as a spiritual path to cross the evolutionary threshold, all the better to join together as a species and join together in deciding what kind of species do we want to be, and how as a species can we best meet the looming suffering that is ongoing already. We're in it now with the fires, floods, and all the rest with biospheric collapse. This has a lot to do, again, as I mentioned, with ancestral healing and with deep cultural healing, because this information, this new wisdom that is circulating through our culture can enable us to move into the deep roots of our culture and do deep cultural healing from which a flourishing culture might arise. And so this is definitely an integral part of our own well-being, of our own healing, of our own consciousness awakening, awakening from trauma. And I want to shout out to one very inspiring person who's doing this kind of work, Resmaa Menakem. Those of us who find ourselves in a position of white advantage live with an embodied sense of white supremacy that we have inherited from our environment, and that shows up in surprising ways when we do the work. So for those of us who find ourselves in a position of white advantage, I strongly recommend the beautiful path and methods, very down to earth, and beautifully revealing of ultimately the best in human nature that Resmaa outlines in his book, My Grandmother's Hands. So I recommend as one pathway, especially given the crisis currently regarding white supremacy in America, to work through the book, My Grandmother's Hands, and also to take his free e-course that he has on his website. And that we join together as deep culture creators. We are all part of an inner being culture, as Thich Nhat Hanh described. And it's through healing our culture and taking our own living culture as a primal art form that we can join together genuinely in crossing this evolutionary threshold through this evolutionary crisis, not just a biospheric crisis, but an evolutionary crisis of consciousness that we find ourselves on.
Thank you, Richard. That was really rich. And I'm so happy that you gave a shout out to Resmaa's work. Very important stuff. All right. Well, I'd love to introduce our other panelist here, Reiko Fabianer. Forgive me if I said that wrong. Reiko is, he's a consultant and a facilitator and a healer. He creates powerful learning environments for people to experience deeper connection, insight, and well-being. And he's sought after for his presence and capacity to help people during times of transition. He's created transformative leadership programs that are based on inclusivity and equity, and has worked with many NGOs, businesses, and universities over the 20 years. He trains and advises social entrepreneurs, cultural workers, activists, spiritual teachers, and political leaders within the USA, Central America, UK, Middle East. He's also trained and worked closely with leadership from Google and many other very well-known organizations and businesses. He's also a founding member of the Guild of Future Architects and Salmon Nation, as well as a core advisor to How We Deepen New Stories. And I'm really, really happy that he's here with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Reiko, to share
Sure. Thank you, Jewel and Richard. And I just want to echo first, it's really beautiful and humbling to be here, and specifically at this time. It's Jewel, I like that you and others had kind of named the importance of feeling into this collective we, into this coherence, into this heart space, because we know it's, you know, as much as talented as we are as intellectuals and thinkers, that it takes, you know, both the heart and the gut and the intellect and soul all together for this particular time, these new capacities that are coming online. So it's an honor to be able to be here with folks and to talk about these things. Yeah, there's so much that already resonates and that I agree with, and I appreciate the framing and the inquiry in terms of who must we become to create a more regenerative and equitable society. And I think at its core, for me, in my experience, is that, you know, dark nights of the soul are a crisis in meaning. It's a crisis in a sense of purpose, both individually and collectively. And it's these existential crises that impact how we show up or how we don't show up, and I think how we individually and collectively create. I think those of us who recognize that we're going through something at an individual level that starts with a sense of dissonance. It starts with a sense of something's not quite right, but I need to follow this dissonance. This might actually be really, really important. And I think this is where Jewel talks about the reckoning. You know, it's like, how do I account for something? How do I and we begin to account for things that need to be considered? The conditioning, the karma, the shadow, individually and collectively, that shows up, as Richard says, in our bodies and also in our systems, in our social structures, in our politics. And so when the dissonance starts, that's something to pay attention to. And I think coming from a modern perspective, we're not really comfortable with dissonance. And we're not really super attuned, most of us, or at least many of us, not to our body. And what type of information and insight is coming directly from our bodies as expressions of the earth, as expressions and fractals of society. And so I think, you know, the paying attention to the dissonance and listening to why it's there is really important. And then when it turns to, and if we're lucky and fortunate enough to where it turns to crisis and perhaps even despair, then the question is, you know, what is it do I need to learn? What needs healing? And I think most importantly, you know, what type of support do I and we need for this type of new insight and healing to emerge through the system? I think, again, in the modern West, which many of us know already, it's a challenge to be able to think that I'm not separate, you know, and that I have to figure this out, you know, on my own. And and that is part of our collective shadow of our modern ways of being, is the sense of alienation and hyper individualism, you know. And so when we can't get to points of dissonance and we get to points of existential crisis, you know, asking who can support me in terms of what I need to learn, who can support me in terms of healing, can be a challenge. And so I think this was why it's important to turn to practitioners, methods, lineages from, you know, cultural, spiritual, ancestral lineages that really can get us to move or get us to be open to the new insights and capacities that are wanting and needing to come online. So I think that's the first thing to say is that, and I agree with Jewel and probably everybody here, most folks here, is that, you know, we have been probably for a while now entering into a global rite of passage, and of course we're feeling it. We're beyond the dissonance. At least here, most of us are here in in the modern West are beginning to enter or feel the crises of systems collapsing and systems showing that there are things that need to be healed and worked on. And I look at it as an experience as an invitation, an invitation to let things go. And that's that, and that takes a degree of support, and it takes a degree of embodied awareness, and that takes a lot of grieving, quite honestly. A number of colleagues and clients who I work with during these times, and I also live here in California, of fires, of civil unrest, of pandemic, they're showing up and not knowing how to show up for work, or show up if their students show up for courses, and there's a sense of deep despair, and it is really it really speaks to the sense making of this moment, because we're not entrained too well collectively around this notion of rites of passage. This is not something at a deep level, is not really part of our collective culture broadly here at least in the United States, and that's kind of the perspective I'm offering right now. And so there's a lot of wisdom that can be drawn from intact communities and traditional communities around the maturation of our egos, of our psycho-spiritual selves going through rites of passage. And so we're now being compelled. And so when folks who I'm working with and or coaching are expressing this sense of despair, and I turn to a story or framing, at least, around the plant. And there's this a plant. I'll tell the story. When I was in first grade, we were given these seeds, and we had to learn the miracle of life by planting these seeds into a Dixie cup, a paper cup, and then tending to it, really cultivating it at a daily as a daily practice. We can call it ritual, we can call it exercise, anything that we're bringing our attention to, right? And of course, as kids, there's a sense of wonder and awe and hope that we're doing the right things so things grow, and then it blooms. And so I remember walking and bringing this flower and this plant in this cup, and being really mindful. And it didn't have it wasn't a meditation, but it might as well have been a meditation walking home, because I really didn't want to drop this cup, taking it to my folks, or taking it to my mother. We were to give it to my mom on Mother's Day. And that was 40 years ago, and she bloomed this beautiful plant, and more recently, she gave it to me, a piece of it, to bloom on my own. She gave me part of the root, and I look at it, and it is part of my practice to look at it, because I always see, that there are some of the flowers and the stems that have already died, and some that are just breaking through the soil, and then some that are in full bloom. And I use that as a metaphor, and often when I'm teaching or coaching, I'll actually show the plant and say, there's something here that's dying, and there's something here that's emerging, and there's something here that's blooming all at once. So how do we begin to understand these conditions now as an opportunity to tend to that which is dying, tend to that which is emerging, and also begin to recognize and have gratitude for what is blooming in our life, and this is happening all at once. And then and then also to begin to look at where we're at externally, and see what aspects of our society are fading or crumbling or dying, and what is wanting to emerge in terms of new systems, new ways of being, new forms of interactions, and new types of value exchange, and new understandings of relationship to self, other, and planet. And then what's already in full bloom that we can express gratitude for right now. And that's been a really important frame for folks. And I think the follow-up to that frame, and I'll wrap this up right now, is, okay, if we're holding that frame, and it's an invitation to enter into that frame or that narrative that's really connected to a cyclical notion of death and rebirth. what do we do to be able to practice it? And this is where some of the inner technologies, the wisdom traditions across lineages can help us out and do help us out. And so I'll stop there and just say that I feel like it's a real big invitation to explore.
Thank you, Reiko. That what a beautiful story. And yeah, what that brings up, and we're going to go into kind of a little just emergent dialogue here, discussion between the three of us. And what really sparked me when you were speaking, and maybe I can throw this back out at both of you if you want to speak to it, is just this idea of death and rebirth, and of death in particular. Our culture, like you say, those that have that have some practice or lineage that is able to hold death, I think are more able to deal with the dark night, whereas those that are in our culture, death is seen as something to just avoid, to look the other way. My mother passed away last year, and I had to fight to have some time with her body, where my family wanted just her to go off, and just like don't want to admit it or look at it. It used to be that we would hold wakes and time with those that depart, and really honor this time of passing by acknowledging and facing death in a healthy way, place that we're all going, but we avoid it and we live as if it's not going to happen to us. So I think this is an illness in our culture that we're, as part of our reckoning right now, and to really acknowledge death. And by the way, we're having a wonderful talk on October 19th. I'm going to give a shout out where a woman that does Death Cafe or Passages will be speaking about this very subject. So at the end, I'll give you a contact if you're interested. But anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up. If you have either of you have any more to say about that, and also about this dissonance, which also is, when we're faced with death and we don't have a way of holding it or containing it, we don't have a belief structure that can accommodate that. That brings up a dissonance and a extreme discomfort. So what do either of you have anything you'd like to add to that or to say about that? Whoops, unmute yourself there, Richard.
I can speak to that. And I would like to speak to the experiences of survivors of abuse, oppression, and trauma, in particular to the spiritual survivor communities that I've been working with for a number of years, who have suffered very painful spiritual abuse and survived it. And part of their experience is an encounter with evil. And without going into whether there really is such a thing in a fundamental sense as evil, or if it's just something that arises in human experience, let's run with it's something that people experience. It's a part of the experience of many people who have survived great harm perpetrated by other human beings. And a number of people have looked into this. What do we do with this situation? How can we help people that have suffered such deep harms from spiritual abuse and abusive spiritual teachers? And a lot of it has to do, like you're saying, with denial of death. Ernest Becker contributed a lot of knowledge with his, and actually coined the phrase, the denial of death, a number of years ago. And that gave rise to terror management theory and the life and death stark encounter that many of us experience in an existential whole body way, in utero and at birth, where we're just encountered with this magnificent, stark, perhaps in the moment terrifying moment of being alive, recognizing that we're being alive and that we're so fragile. I just listened to or watched a video of Stevie Wonder, which conjures some of this. Stevie Wonder and Sting singing about human fragility and vulnerability. And this is a universal cosmic human experience. And this drives a lot of the harms that are perpetrated upon us and our fellow human beings. This inability to come to terms with our own mortality. And it plays out in so many different ways across a broad spectrum, from people who are stuck in that and wreak havoc throughout the world, causing all kinds of terror and damage, projecting it out onto the world, to our own encounter with death, and which will come before very long. And we can speak to Thich Nhat Hanh and his embrace of the whole wisdom of inner being and contemplation, deep body contemplation that emerges on his spiritual path of coming to terms with our own impermanence and how we so resist coming to terms with our impermanence, our terror at our own mortality, and the sheer heartbreaking beauty of human life that lies behind that terror that we can inhabit. So these are some sources of wisdom that I can speak to, and it's very real. It's very, very real. And when it's not addressed, it can play out in very dramatic and painful ways. My own life partner, Stana Edelman, is a death worker. She's a death guide and has for many decades worked with children who have suffered the death of people close to them, such as a parent or a sibling, and kept in touch with some of these people as they grow up and tracked the healing. And that's informed her understanding of the consequences of how this can play out if we don't take it on as part of our spiritual path, this tough question of the terror of being alive that lurks behind the veil in our own mortality. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Richard. That was really rich. Thank you so much. Reiko, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or we have some other questions that we can move on to. If not, what would you like?
Yeah, we can move on. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, the other thing was speaking to that dissonance, just that you were talking about. I think in the collective level, we're looking at dissonance in ideologies, competing ideologies. You see a lot of the political divide, of course, but also these different views on what's really happening. All the so, if you will, conspiracy stuff and Q and just all the different versions of what people are saying are happening, and how that's creating a big dissonance in us as a collective. Like, what's really going on? I don't know what's really happening. What's happening? Oh, this is what's happening, or no, that's not happening. This is what's really happening underneath everything. And no, that's not what's. So it's this huge cognitive dissonance that we're experiencing right now. And I want to just invite and suggest that this is that also adds to this opportunity to invite us to go deeper, just to let go, needing to know what's going on. let go needing to have some story about what's going on, and go deeper and let everything die, you know, just like accept the death of old stories. So this is part of that dark night, and it's a welcome shedding. Like, oh my God, I don't have to figure it all out.
Mhm.
Wow. That's a freedom. That's a release to know that we don't know.
Yeah.
So do you want to add anything to that? Or?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. I think you know, these types of conditions are why I start off with the frame and story that we're entering into a global rite of passage, and I offer that to folks, that as a story to consider, as a healthier story to consider, as that we've continued to, as a species, survive and evolve, and that evolution has been messy. And this is an opportunity to go through another transformative moment. And it's tough, and it's tough because there's the gift, and you spoke to this, Jewel, earlier, and Richard spoke to this too. The gift of our modern society has been the emergence of a lot of kind of democratic revolutions and science and reason, and the rights and autonomy of the individual to be able to self-determine. And we know that those gifts of our modern way of living are deeply entwined and can't be disentangled from all the harm that you've named and all the darkness that this society and culture has been built upon. And so, on one hand, so if we're looking at, I think one of the biggest challenges is that, or the biggest shadows of our modern worldview is this sense of separation. And if I'm able to separate myself from you and separate myself from the planet or the earth, I can turn you into an object, or I could see you as just an object or a resource to be used for whatever it is that I want to do. Or I can, I can racialize you, I can gender you, and I can do the same thing to the earth. And so that's why we see, a big part of the reason why we see a lot of the destructive, extractive ways of living. And that is the deep shadow that I think has informed the structures and systems that we struggle with, and give rise to the type of racialized, gendered, sexualized forms of discrimination and inequity that we see in society. And so that's obviously the bad news, and that's what we're working to address. And kind of, interesting is like, that co-arose, with this invitation for people's voices to be heard. And with the invitation for multiple voices to be heard, it can turn into a cacophony at times. And so the sense making gets really, really, really hard, and so, how do we begin to offer a narrative where multiple stories can fit into, and and there is something around how do we let old stories die in terms of stories done perhaps service as well. And we're creating and offering new stories that are more regenerative, that are more tapped back into the wisdom of nature, that are informed by the sense of interdependence, and perhaps even, depending on grace or lineage, the direct experience of connection with everything. And so that's a new expression or iteration of an old story, but now we're experiencing it on a global level, or at least we're trying to offer that on a global level. And I think what's I think the challenge is for me is that, somebody, is deeply informed by an old story that may be very traditional or very modern in terms of, wanting to get ahead and be successful materially. I can't force that death for them. I have to engage them, and this is where I see sometimes within progressive spiritual movements, and we talked about this the other day, some of the impatience, and understandable impatience and projection of our own shadow of like, this is the way we have to be it. And if you're not this way, you're part of the problem, and I think there's a partial truth to that. And we need to be able to meet people with skillful means whose stories and perspectives on what is a successful world or a right world is different than our own. Sorry. But I think there's a learning how to be able to code switch. There's a learning how to be able to oppose, but also have an open heart, and that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
How do I shift things and be in opposition while I'm still holding compassion and hopefully in training, or inviting a deeper we to emerge between us. And I think that's a lot of the cultural work and the systemic work we need to do.
Yeah, Rico, let's go into that. Thank you. That's a perfect kind of segue into the last little section here of sharing that we can to offer all of you, which is some ways that of holding ourselves and each other in this time so that we can get through it. And I'm really glad that you brought up what I call the avoidance. There is a tendency in the spiritual worlds to do, because we have this avoidance of death, and to do the spiritual bypass thing, which is very prevalent. And it is time for us to embrace the discomfort and know that the only way out, the only way to the other side is through. And we have our personal that only individually we can do alone. Only there's things that only you have to be alone in. And then there's what we're doing to collectively that we can help each other in. And so we have the macro and the micro. And let's talk with the 15 minutes that we have left here. I think obviously there's so much more to say about the subject matter, but I'd love to leave people with, some real, supportive tools and practices that each of you, all three of us might be able to offer here as ways of both going through this time and what's on the other side, what we can look towards, what's that new day, that light at the other side that can kind of keep that inspiration in the darkest times. So whoever would like to jump in and just offer, we have maybe a few minutes each to offer some tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to speak to the healing power of beauty that can be found all over the world, virtually everywhere, inside of the storm, inside of the full catastrophe. And we encounter that in the difficult, challenging in-between spaces that we have, in between cultural spaces, in between gender spaces, all kinds of in-between liminal spaces, the healing power of beauty. And our own body minds actually can be related to as beauty-making machines. Our minds, our souls, our hearts, our ability to sense being alive in the biosphere with each other. And this is central to my own Living Arts Wisdom work that I describe on livingartswisdom.com. Is just this, that's central to the work, the healing power of beauty. Because the earth that we live on, the biosphere, we all know is a place of heartbreaking beauty. Just awe-provoking. Looking up at the stars, at the Hubble space photographs, into the eyes of a child. We live in a universe of staggering beauty, and we can connect with each other through this healing power of beauty as we create our own cultural connections and create a culture of healing beauty. And that's central to my work. That's where it starts with the suffering, and then it enters into the portal of the healing power of beauty. And we can look into each other's eyes and gaze upon each other and recognize that beneath the surface, if not radiantly on the surface, we're just suffused with beauty, and I can see that. And it's my hope to continue to work with other people so that they can see it too. And this is what I actually do in my work. And so on a,
That's beautiful,
you know,
Richard.
the healing power of beauty. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is beautiful. And I often think of beauty as medicine. And absolutely. So thank you. It's powerful. Reiko, do you have any tools or practices you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think one that might seem simple, but it's not, is that creating space to grieve. I think learning how to grieve and finding support for our grief, and it's not just our individual grief; it's actually collective grief and generational grief that we hold in our body to come out. I know there's the old saying that we all grieve in different ways, and I don't believe that. I think we repress grief in very different ways. And but when it comes down to it, grief is crying, snot, and anger, and it's also the medicine. It actually releases things from our bodies, so that we have more capacity and energy to be creative, to step forward, to listen more deeply, for more clarity to come through. So I know that sometimes spiritual retreats are seen as things that can be very gentle, and I think sometimes they should be gentle. But sometimes I think we need to create retreats for the for a detox. I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think this is like kind of deeper decolonization work, is through the body and the release and grieving, learning how to grieve. And I think we all know people who we can come to who feels like they can hold us, or places that can hold us where our grief can come. So trust that, even if we're afraid for that. So that's one thing. And the second thing I'll say is that ask people who we trust, who are holding, who we trust and hold wisdom, to give us honest feedback about the things that we are limited in, the things that might be shadowy, the ways in which we're not showing up fully, and to listen carefully and to listen to that wisdom and that feedback, and then begin to practice that type of authentic relating. More and more, just little bit by bit. And then finally, the third thing is from if we grieve and we learn to relate more authentically and get feedback authentically from those who we trust, then we can choose to be creative and be of service in ways that will contribute to new systems. So those are the three things that I would name.
Oh man, so glad that you brought up grief. So with some of the tools and practices I'll share here, and you can also see on our website, innerresilience.net, that we have places, times to get together and connect. I feel like that's super important, is that we have places to just gather and just share and just connect and just be together and really feel our humanity together. So, and that said, there's so much information out there. There's so many people, having the different, as I mentioned about the conflicting ideologies. I find one of the most powerful practices for me right now is deliberately going into a place of mystery and not knowing. Just as I mentioned, it's such a freedom to just say, I don't know what's happening. And I know, Reiko, you talk about sense making, and I think it is important to do sense making. And sometimes it's super freeing just to say, I can't make any sense of this. I'm just going to let it be what it is, and drop into the present moment. So the thing that's carried me through all these fires, for instance, and the different crises that I've been involved in working with people, who are traumatized, is coming to the moment, the present moment, and just being with your body. Somatic practices, just to be with your body, your breath, this one moment right here. Let the stories go, let the future thinking, the past thinking, just be with what is the next step. And it just kind of it just brings the whole world down to this like really focused moment. And that's a passage in a way, you know, we go into this focused moment, this be here now, it actually opens us up to this incredible other way of being, that interbeing, that awakened being. But that in a way is a rite of passage too. It's like letting everything go and coming to the present moment, just being with what's true in yourself, in this moment, in your body, in your breath, in your surroundings, and then going forward, next step, not needing to know. So that's my one tool I'll give to all of you. And there's so many others, but the somatic is really important. Just tuning into what's true, and our bodies never lie. They really tell us what's going on. So we got a few minutes left here to sort of wrap it up, and maybe we can have a little bit of a closing, just a couple thoughts from each of you. And I want to be sure to you know, kind of close with a little bit of I wrote a poem, actually, I'm going to share with you. It came out for today. So it came out last night. And so it's on the topic, and we'll end with that. But first, I'd love to just throw it back to you. And Richard, if you have a couple, you know, ending thoughts, closing thoughts that you'd like to share, anything that you want to add.
Sure. We have an enormous opportunity to create a culture together of healing beauty that speaks directly to the hard edges of human suffering. And if there's a hope of traversing the coming challenge of biospheric collapse, I think that that culture of healing beauty that is capacious and can embrace all of our voices, all of our consciousness, including the not knowing, including the knowing as well, is the best path forward of joining together with each other in what is really a sacred path through the storm. And I would invite us to consider that, and as a path where we can actually, you know, we're strong, we have wisdom, each of us does, and we can do it. We can join together in opening up a space for cultural healing, for the emergence of a new culture that we know feels right together. This is my path. I know it's the path of others as well, including those present today. And so I would like to shout out a song of praise to all of the people who are engaged in this work, in their own, each in their own, with their own voice in their own way. And shout out to the vision of this new culture that's beyond trauma, beyond depression, beyond abuse, and that stands up in the face of the challenge of everything that is so daunting in our daily lives.
Thank you.
To prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. Reiko, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just a minute. Not too long ago, I was doing some healing work with somebody who's from Brazil, and as we were working, her right side of her body was really kinked up, and when we were working, you know, one of her ancestors came through, and it was an ancestor who was enslaved and was about to be killed. And after we did this work, I didn't say anything. She said, I felt one of my African ancestors come through and was really concerned about how I and my daughter are living. And I said, well, this feels like that this is being moved through you, that this is being healed through you. And I'm reminded, that reminded me of Thich Nhat Hanh's poem around looking at your palm, you know, and meditating on the hand and seeing all the past generations in your own body. And this is what you were saying, Jewel, just seeing all the past things that we've inherited, the gifts and the shadows. And then in the moment, looking at the future, what are the future generations in the same hand that I could see? And what's the work to be done with this body to begin to heal so those future generations can emerge? So yeah, how do we tend to that which is dying, emerging, and blooming, essentially?
Beautiful, thank you. Yes, there's so much more that we can say. This has been such a rich conversation, and we're going to continue in other forms. The three of us actually are holding on November 1st a ancestral healing gathering, November 1st at 11 a.m. Pacific time. It's not up on our website yet, but I just put my email in the chat, and please do contact me, and I'll make sure you get on the announcement list for everything that we're doing, and holding spaces for all of you. And you can also participate and join and bring your gifts, bring what it is that you do. We invite that. This is a collaborative that we're doing at the Inner Resilience Net. So, and with that, I'll just, make sure I give a shout out to Transition US, which is something that who we've been working with, and they are all over the world working with communities to help us wean our dependence off of the fossil fuel economy and all that extractive system. So they're doing the nuts and bolts, boots on the ground stuff, the real hard work of what it means to get into alternative energy systems, and what a culture looks like that is based on the earth and based on people care, like we do at the Inner Resilience. So there's a lot more that can be said about that. And we also talk about social permaculture. So I wanted to give a shout out to that too, because we see this work, the inner work that we're talking about, as being the zone zero in permaculture terms. And that this dark stuff that we're talking about, thinking of it as a garden, I like to use that analogy, that it's compost, that it's stuff, from our lives, letting it drop off as we move into a new way, and drop off personally and collectively, turning all of this into compost so we can have a beautiful garden, regenerative garden together. We can do it. It is possible, even if we don't see it or have a story about it yet. I think we're making it up as we go right now. And with that, I'm going to finish with this poem, and just thank you all that attended here. And I'm going to share with you this little poem that just came out for this session. You were born for this time. The very experience of being born prepared you. What does it take to enter the dark passage, the narrow way? It takes your whole self and nothing less. It takes nothing more than all of you, yet nothing not part of you. Regrets and grievances cannot fit past this journey. Your guilt and shame will keep you too small and tangled to even enter. Your anger and pride inflame your flesh, and the swelling will keep you held in the dark way, unable to exit. But your grief will take you there. And when you welcome it in, you drop all pretense and plan, because grief is honest and raw and helps you to shed the old skin. Release your beloveds to the unknown. Move softly through the impulse of nature's direction. Listen to its wisdom like a child. There must be you, and only you, holy you, holy you. The great wide you that bows low, that knows a tree whose roots are deep can hold the highest branches, that is stripped clean and naked like a babe. Again, you were born for this time. The very experience of being born prepared you. Let your body remember your soft and trusting cry for the one who loves you always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jewel, Richard, and Rico, for really that rich, deep, and truly insightful, not only conversation, but new narrative, because these conversations are so essential for us all to really find that the acceptance of a lot of what we're talking about, facing our fears, facing our trauma, death, resurrection, all of these things that we somehow have been taught to resist in a way that's fearful, that we're finally coming to a narrative which is broadening, where we can understand that it is through these walls or these barriers that we have, that when we walk through them, it is also one more step in our own evolution and transformation, and that the fear is more actually fearing the fear than taking action to embodying it. So thank you so much for also the regenerative garden ethos that's also so beautiful in really giving us the narrative of seeing how that can be doing. And I also love the vision of this new culture, healing beauty. I mean, beauty can truly save our planet if we just understood what we meant by beauty in that essence, and the cultural healing that you're talking about. And like you said, this conversation has only just begun, but thank you for being the navigators and really aligning us more and more on this path, because the more we also talk about it, not only about our vulnerability, but about our fears, the more I think people also see that we have so many common domains here, that when we sort of shed light on it, it's already lessened in that sort of essence of fear, which is more an essence of transformation. In order to know light, we must know dark. In order to know hot, we must know cold, and so forth. And I just wanted to, as Thich Nhat Hanh has been mentioned today, I found a quote, a bit of a longer quote from him that I thought would just be a nice summary to this, and leave us also with an intention that is on a thriving side. And he says, "Be yourself. Life is precious as it is. All elements for your happiness are already here. There is no need to run, to strive, to search or struggle. Just be. Just being in the moment, in this place, is the deepest practice of meditation. Most people cannot believe just walking as though you have nowhere to go is enough. They think that striving and competing are normal and necessary. Try practicing aimlessness, if just for 5 minutes, and you'll see how happy you are during these few minutes. Because people usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk on either water or thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we're engaged in a miracle, which you don't even realize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, the curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle." And with that, I hand over the word to Jim.
Thank you, Sabina. And thank you, Jewel and Richard and Reiko. What a deep session. I would love to think through, Jewel, maybe having a deeper dive, maybe sometime down the trail. Because these issues, as Sabina was just saying, and you all pointed out, go to the heart of human existence. And I think it turned out to be an extraordinary grace and synchronicity that we pondered these deep issues at the moment of Thich Nhat Hanh's possible passing. Because that is the container that holds us all. And just one quick comment. As a philosopher, I was so struck by the notion of beauty. And it made me remember Plato's Symposium, which many scholars consider to be his greatest work, which is an after-dinner discussion between Socrates and his friends, which lasted all night. And the theme was on love. And Socrates tells the story of his encounters with the old crone Diotima that taught him about love and taught him that it is love that is the intermediary intelligence that binds all of life together and assists us in ascending the ladder of love until at the very end, we find ourselves on the edge of the ocean of beauty. Even love bows before beauty. In fact, it is the great destiny of love to bring all of our dark and light dimensions, all of our finite foibles, our passions, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams, to knit all that together to create beauty. You remember the great Pythagoras, who was the teacher of Plato, coined the term cosmos, because when he understood the power of beauty, he says the whole universe is a song. Cosmos means ornament. That we're in this universe of all is not an inert, random, lifeless coagulation of matter. It's actually a song. It's actually a poem. And so beauty is that ultimate omega point for all of our lives. So I just want to honor beauty as we honor Thich Nhat Hanh and his beautiful, beautiful soul. Let us pray for Thich Nhat Hanh, all of us, over these next days. We're bearing witness to the transition of a great soul. Let us all hold him within our sense of beauty. And then tomorrow, we are going to take up the very fascinating subject of integral transpersonal education. And then on Friday, we're going to have a dialogue with a mother and a daughter on what they call FemQ. What is feminine intelligence? If you had to do an IQ test for the feminine, what would it look like? What are those qualities? That's on Friday. And then just so you're holding it, all of next week is dedicated to a single integrated program on biomimicry and regenerative economics. That's going to be led by Ed Muller, who convened our sessions in July on donut and regenerative economics. And I just wanted to highlight these next sessions that are coming up over the next 2 days and then next week as a way to say that what Jewel, you and Richard and Reiko have brought to us today as we journey through the dark night into the light is that's what Humanity Rising is here to serve, is all the goodness in the world, all that is beautiful in the world, because that is what is the magnetic attractor of coherence that's going to lead humanity through its frailties to the inevitability of justice and a better world. Of that, there can be no doubt where we're going to end up The question is, how long is it going to take us to wake up to the obvious? And you've helped us do that. So I just want to thank you. And also to say that there's an after chat party each day on Humanity Rising for people that just want to get together on a Zoom call. So Stan or someone, if you can put the link up as we close here, that would be great. And I want to just acknowledge in conclusion here, the wonderful chats that have just graced us all through this session today. The people have been enthralled with your presentation. You can just feel the excitement and the enthusiasm. So I just want to honor all the chat people. So thank you, everyone. We will see you again tomorrow, as usual, at 5 p.m. Central European Time. Bless you. Bless Thich Nhat Hanh. And may we all contemplate the beautiful. Bye, everyone.